Hello everybody and welcome to the Thursday edition of Video Clips. I have a real interesting study to talk to you about today. First one's about actually a couple of interesting things to talk about today, but the first one is a study that has to do with your gut bacteria. And let's just start by saying the human gastrointestinal tract is populated with trillions of microorganisms that help to digest food, serve as a barrier to not allow pathogenic substances to enter the bloodstream, assist in assimilation of nutrients, and they're an integral part of the immune system. There are more than 10,000 species of microbes, and the number of microorganisms that live in and on the body outnumber the body's cells by 10 to 1. Pretty significant population. Diet has a profound effect on the composition of this population, and according to a new study, an almost immediate effect. 11 people were included in the study, and they were instructed to eat normally for 4 days, to keep a journal of their food intake, and submit fecal samples to researchers. And then they were instructed to eat the food that the researchers provided for a few days, and then they were followed up. So without getting into all the details and the specificity of the diets, I'll just tell you this. When fed a plant-based diet with low protein and fat and high fiber intake, very few changes took place in the microbial population. But when the subjects were fed an animal foods-based diet high in fat, there were major changes in the population, which included an increase in anaerobic bacteria, which has been shown to cause colitis in mice. The researchers reported that the bacteria, the anaerobic bacteria, thrived on the increased fat, and some of these bacteria changed their genetic expression in response to the increased animal food consumption. So, in other words, just to condense this all down, an animal-based diet increased the population of pathogenic bacteria, while a plant-based diet did not. Now, based on the numerous functions and importance of the bacteria, particularly in the GI tract, it would be a great idea to eat a health-promoting diet and keep that bacterial colony in good shape. And there's an almost instantaneous improvement when you start eating a plant-based diet like the one that we prescribe. Okay, and it definitely shows another mechanism of action on how an animal foods-based diet leads to more degenerative disease. Okay, now for some really good news. I love when stuff like this happens. It seems like lawsuits and multi-billion-dollar judgments and fines are starting to have an impact on drug companies. Now, I've always argued that these companies make so much money that the fines and penalties and everything have just become a cost of doing business. But apparently, this is starting to register. And as a result, GlaxoSmithKline has announced that it will no longer tie the compensation of its drug reps to the number of prescriptions their doctors prescribe, and will also no longer pay doctors to promote its products. This is the first major drug company that has made an announcement of this type. Now, Glaxo has had the usual regulatory problems in the United States. They all do. It's also had many problems overseas and is currently the subject of an investigation in China, in which the company is alleged to have engaged in bribery by making illegal payments both to government officials and to doctors. Of course, Glaxo employees are stating that this change in policy has nothing to do with any of that. I don't see how that can possibly be the case. But anyway, the policy means that Glaxo reps are going to return to the way that the drug industry used to function decades ago. About 30 years ago, drug reps were paid based on their experience and their knowledge. They got a very high salary. They've always been well paid, but they were expected to be knowledgeable and to be good at what they did, which was to talk about drugs with doctors. But about 30 years ago, drug companies started incentivizing drug reps with pay related to how many prescriptions their docs would write, and they started paying doctors to speak at CME conferences promoting the use of drugs, a lot of times for off-label purposes. So Glaxo won't be doing that anymore, and they also will not be incentivizing doctors to attend conferences. It's illegal in the States, but in other countries, they have been known to pay doctors to attend, pick up their travel expenses, and that sort of thing. It's alleged that this went on in China. Glaxo does still intend to pay some docs to do some consulting work in the area of drug development, but they said they're going to really limit the scope of all that. Now, I am not fond of drug companies, including Glaxo, but I will give the company credit for seeing the handwriting on the wall and doing something to address serious and obvious conflict of interest issues without being mandated to do so. If other drug companies are smart, they're going to quickly follow suit. It is always best when industries clean themselves up from within rather than waiting for the government to do it for them. The good news for Glaxo is that the practices that they're ending are very expensive, tens of millions of dollars per year. The company should take part of this savings and put it into lowering the cost of the drugs, contrary to what many people think and what the drug companies have tried to tell us. The biggest expense in drugs, the cost of drugs, is really not research and development, it is the marketing of these drugs. So if they're smart, they'll lower their costs. Now there's a whole lot more cleanup needed in order to restore integrity to the drug industry. There are still a lot of issues such as the fees paid for enrolling patients in clinical trials and other such practices. But this is a good first step. Let's hope there's going to be more to come. And I've never been a big fan of lawsuits in the courts, but one good thing is it does bring about social change. I mean, we can thank the trial lawyers for the fact that we're sitting in restaurants these days and not having somebody puffing away on cigarettes at the table next to us. And maybe one of these days we'll be able to thank the court system for wreaking so much havoc on drug companies that they were forced back into integrity in many respects. All right, well, that's all for today and for the week. I will be back to you again on Tuesday.